right, Melissa, Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, you've been on three times, right?
Is it 3? Yeah, it is now.
This is number 4.
This is, yes,
this is
and 4. You've been on mine.
I've been on yours, I think twice. Yeah. Brandon is new. Brandon, welcome.
French fry.
And that's actually where I want to start, because my audience doesn't really know about you, and you and I are good friends, and I want you to tell us a little bit about we'll call your origin story, because I know you have a dope story. So tell us a little about yourself.
At what point in my life are we starting here? Like how far back?
You can start wherever you want. Like, because here's what I ask people when I ask this question. It's like, if you had to look back and you had to connect the dots, what are the things, like the most important things that have happened that have led you up to you becoming who you are today?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's see. Grew up in Southern Utah, and in high school, we'll start with high school, because high school was pretty important in my life. High school was the place where I got bullied. Hated high school, but I started doing magic. Like prestidigitation.
I remember this, yes.
Yeah. I was really shy. Like if somebody talked to me, I would get so flustered that I would almost turn beet red.
Yeah.
And in order to do magic, I almost had to create a alternate personality.
Yeah.
In order to do it. I had to totally fake it. And that I kind of created another personality, gained some confidence that way. And then after high school, sorry, our dog is just barreling through all of the audio equipment. And then after high school, I found volleyball, started playing volleyball. It was one of the few things I was just naturally good at, and ended up playing professional volleyball. Played for several different colleges, not for college, but for volleyball. Didn't do so well in college because of that. Yeah. And then
Played pro volleyball.
I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Professional beach volleyball.
Yeah.
I have weirdly long arms. Weirdly long. You're eyeing my arms.
We'll have to see. I remember
they're long.
Yeah.
I'm 6'1", my reach is almost 6'9".
Really?
So it's
so you're perfect for volleyball.
Yeah. And I like superheroes and comic books. So that's maybe your origin story. There's not much there.
I love that. Melissa, I know there's probably some things that he's pro volleyball. That's one detail that he probably left out. Is there anything he's missing there that you would add in?
I mean, I think one of the things that defines him when we've talked through some of his life story is the fact that he played pro volleyball and played at a high level and was really good and had a lot of potential, and then ended up leaving the sport and was pretty beat up, kind of injured after that, and had to go through this entire, who am I? What is my worth? What is my value if I'm not an athlete, if I'm not performing at that level? And I think that's something that, you struggled with for a long time.
Yeah, that was a rough one.
Yeah.
That was, because again, in high school, I was nobody. I was invisible. And volleyball, I don't know how, but somehow I became a hyper athletic volleyball player, despite never working out once in high school.
Really?
So I was a pretty darn good athlete, and then when I got injured, hurt my back, I was none of those things. Volleyball was the only thing that made me unique, made me special, being the athletic volleyball player. That's what everybody knew me as.
Yeah.
So when that went away, there was a lot of is anybody gonna ever care? Am I just gonna be invisible again? And that was rough psychologically, lots of depression.
I think a lot of people go through that, especially former athletes, where they build up this, this is my identity, this is who I am. And then without that, it's who am I without this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so how did you eventually get through that?
It would be hard to say I had a, switch flipping moment. I don't remember it being like that. Yeah. I just remember after a while just realizing that my identity wasn't my job. It was a job.
Yeah.
I was a volleyball player. I could be something else. And just little by little, just I'm still the character that I was before. I still have all the same characteristics. I'm loyal and I'm friendly and those sorts of things that kind of give me worth. I think the other thing was that just people that I thought were going to not care anymore still cared. And I was okay, this is interesting. I had another experience doing a box jump, that type of thing, where I really thought, hey, I'm going to fail at this. It's so big. I'm going to fail. And then when I filled, and people still cared, and they were still like, that was awesome. That was another one of those moments where I was like, oh, okay.
And what was that box jump height?
It was I think 62 inches.
It was a world
62
record
inches.
at the time.
Thank you for
He's not going to say
someone
it.
saying that.
He's not going to say it. I'll say it. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Dude, that is awesome.
I kind of bit off more than I could chew.
Okay.
And I was like, oh man, like the box came in, I think the day before we did the jump.
Oh.
And I had done like 58 inches without a problem. I was like, oh, another 4 is not going to be that big of a deal. It was a mile. It might as well been another building. And so I got really worried that like I was just going to fail. And people would be like, this guy's a failure. He's a total like schmuck.
Really quick question. How did you learn magic before YouTube? Like what did you do? Because there's no YouTube back then, right?
So I was lucky enough that my science teacher that I had ended up leaving, and the replacement science teacher came in, and he was a professional magician, and he had performed on Disney cruise ships for like forever. And he just it was the very first day of science class, and he's like, I'm starting a magic club. And I was the kid that tried to be cool. I tried to do everything to be cool, to be seen. And I was the guy that was like, oh, well, I'll go into Japanese club. Nobody cares about Japanese club kids. Like, I just kept doing everything wrong. And so when he announced Magic Club, I was like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And I did. Like, it was a thing that I'm really passionate about things for a short amount of time. I got really passionate about it, and I practiced really hard. But through this club, and videos and like VHS tapes, and if you knew the right people, then you could like learn. But it was mostly through Magic Club at high school.
Yeah.
That's
he still does tricks. You should see. He wows our child.
Really?
Oh, he'll stick
And the
like
dog.
and the dog. Yeah, he'll stick like half a meat stick goes up his nose, and
Really?
my kid is just like, do it again. Yeah,
I haven't seen that one. You might
It's
have
a
to
good
show.
one.
Okay, we'll have to do some
Dinner
B-roll-
tonight.
B-roll
Yeah,
after that.
yeah.
But you did one on a YouTube video that kind of went viral, right? Because it had to do with
There
the
was
Marvel
Yeah.
series.
So,
What was it?
yeah. If for any of the nerds watching, originally it was done on Ant-Man.
Yes.
Paul
Ant-Man.
Rudd, the FBI agent, comes in, and Paul Rudd like makes a card disappear.
Yeah.
Well, the TV show WandaVision came out, and that FBI agent finally learned how to do it, and he did it. I was like, oh man, maybe I'll do a YouTube video on how to do this, and I'll capitalize. And all the nerds hated me because it wasn't the Ant-Man trick. I called it like the Jimmy Woo trick.
Yeah.
But yeah, it ended up doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's so cool. So how did you guys first meet? Because I know there's an original origin story of you two.
Yeah.
And now there's a 2.0 version.
Yeah, 2.0. That's right. We first met through Jim Jones. So I had trained at Jim Jones for about a year with Rob McDonald. And I left, but I still kept in touch with Rob, and he still occasionally like sent me workouts. And somehow I started following him on Instagram, probably through Jim Jones. And when I talked to Rob once, he was like, oh yeah, I'm training this guy, and he's, working really hard and doing great. And I think I like reached out to you on Instagram, right? I think we like.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I was not sliding into his DMs or anything, but I was like, oh, we both train with Rob. Like, nice to meet you. You're into fitness in Salt Lake City. I'm into fitness. Like, I was just looking to connect with people here. And so we ended up meeting up for the first time at FitCon.
Oh yeah.
In Utah, right? You know FitCon, the big fitness show. So we met up and like hung out for a little bit and talked and kind of stayed in touch. And I invited him to brunch maybe a week later.
Yeah.
And neither of us thought it was a date.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Was there was no interest there yet?
No, it was just like,
It was
just like, let's hang
I
out.
specifically remember this line,
What was that?
Keeper, where we were eating and she pulled out her phone to take a photo, and she's like, don't worry, I don't take pictures of guys I'm interested in. I was like,
That
great.
is, I think what I said is I never like tag anybody that I'm dating. Like we were just having this conversation about how like I was not, my dating life was super private. I never shared anybody I was dating on Instagram. So I took a picture of our brunch and I tagged him. And like, I wasn't trying to send a signal. We were just like at brunch. But by the time brunch ended, I was like, oh, he's really cool and like really interesting. So we went out a second time.
Okay.
Is that when I had
And
the allergic reaction?
yeah, and he had a wicked bad allergic
Really?
reaction in
Like
the middle of
Hitch?
dinner. And
Like Hitch?
yeah,
kind of thing?
yeah, it
Yeah.
was actually almost that bad.
Well, I had some weird allergic reactions from
Yeah.
time to time, but I think it was like somebody's perfume or something. But my eyes started like swelling shut.
But like in the middle of that meal before the allergic reaction, we were talking about something and he was like, well, that's okay. I know I'm not your type. And I was like, hold on.
Okay.
Like, what? Like, what makes you think you're not my type? And then he had the allergic reaction, and like we never got a chance to talk about it. But I was like, oh, that's interesting that he would think that he wasn't my type.
Yeah.
But maybe it was just because of what I said at brunch.
No, I mean, that was pretty much it. Like something happened in that conversation. You said something. I was like, oh, I didn't think anything of it. I'm not your
but
type.
he was my type.
Yeah.
And then I basically just had to like throw myself at him before he realized that I was.
Picked up on that.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on it.
You didn't
No,
pick
not
up
at
on
all.
She threw it into my face, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh.
She's like, I
Like,
am
at one
interested.
point,
I am interested.
Like third date, he walks away. I thought it was like a really like third time hanging out. And he's walking away and I'm like, hey, at some point I want you to kiss me. And he turns around and he goes, okay. And then he walks to his car and drives away. So that was our
Brandon
not
and I
so
are very
auspicious
similar.
start.
We're very similar. So you guys hung out for like a few dates?
We
and
dated,
then, okay,
we dated for a couple months. Yeah, I met his parents.
2 or 3?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
I met his parents just because we happened to go down to the cabin and his parents were there. But we hung out and dated. But it was definitely like rocky the first time, I feel like. Whole30 was like really busy and packed and slammed. And I was just like really traveling a lot and doing a lot of stuff. I had been told by the last guy I dated that I was really hard to date because of all of my travel and all my commitments and the fact that I had a kid and everything else. So I like took that story and wrapped it around me like a shawl and walked around with it everywhere. And I mean, I won't speak for you, but I think you had some insecurities at the time. And
it's just, you were at one place in your life and I was at the polar opposite. And it was just a lot for me. It was I was very insecure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like, she's this person and I'm nothing like that. And that's going to be really hard for me to handle.
So you
mentally.
ended it.
Yeah.
He dumped me.
I dumped her.
Cold.
Oh.
At a park.
Did
I
you?
remember we were at
I
a park.
remember.
We were sitting down and he was like, I don't think this is going to work out. Like, I think what he said, if you don't mind me saying, was, I don't think I'm good enough for you.
Wow.
And I just thought, then okay. Like, I can't convince you of this, right? I can't. And I could tell you, and I had told him all of the ways that I felt like he was a great man, but he just wasn't hearing it and absorbing it. And I was like, okay. And that was it, right? We just didn't talk after that for a while. 6 or 8 months at least.
At least that.
So you really believed that, like at least that's the story you're telling yourself, and you believed at that time. So to protect yourself, you broke up with her first, so that she.
Yeah, well, I didn't
kind of. Like,
I don't know. I just felt like it was going to be a burden. You know.
And that energy came through when we were dating, which was hard, right? Because I sensed it.
Yeah.
I didn't want somebody taking care of me. You know, like at the time I was like struggling financially, so it was like, okay, well, I know her and she's going to offer and she's going to be super nice and try to help me out and I'm going to refuse it. But then she's also got like this, substantial following and it was just like, I don't want to have to worry about random strangers talking to me. There's just a lot of factors where I was like, this is way over my pay grade, if, excuse the term. But so to me, it was like, this would just be a whole lot easier on her and me, mostly her, if like I'm not in the picture.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever feel like there was a chance you guys would get back together, or are you like, it's done? It's 100%.
I don't really go back. Basically, I'm like, if it didn't work out the first time, it didn't work out.
Okay.
And it's so rare that two people are so willing and able to do the work that's needed, like on both of their ends for them to come together, right? Like, what are the chances of that happening?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. How did that happen? How did you do the work on you? How did you do the work on you to be like, and then how did you start dating again? Let's talk.
I mean, I had been in therapy a lot, constantly after my divorce and business split. You and I have talked about this a number of times. And so I was doing the work of unpacking like who I was as a person and what I bring to the table. And this story of that I was, hard to date, which I think I embraced because I was a little reluctant to let someone else in because of my last relationship. And so I just spent more time in therapy. I didn't date a lot after him. I really kept it pretty casual. I wasn't looking for a long-term relationship at that point. I had a long distance thing, which was like the perfect degree of commitment for me.
Yeah.
But I just decided that like I was going to stay single until I met someone that I wouldn't have to settle for.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't have to settle anything for. And in my last relationship, I never heard anyone in my last relationship say like, I'm so proud of you. You're doing an awesome job. Like you're a boss. You're like, you're killing it. You're crushing it. Like I never had that.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm not going to get into a partnership unless I can be my full self. Cause like I am like big and I'm here and I have ambition And I think I'm kicking ass. And like, I want someone who's going to be like so proud of that. So I stayed single.
Yeah. So what did your like inner work look like for you? Like, how did you do it?
I mean, there was honestly a lot of regret when I did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey, I'm free.
I was bummed too.
There was a lot of regret. And I think just over time, I started to realize like, hey, if she is so successful, she's had other successful, like, relationships. I'm sure she's not like there was just things I thought maybe this is what I can provide, even if it's not on the financial spectrum. Mm-hmm. Maybe she doesn't give a shit about that. Yeah. Excuse my language. Like maybe she doesn't care.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was just like trying to look at it differently. I was like, what can I bring to the table despite where I'm at right now?
Yeah.
It's like, one is trajectory. Like I work hard. I'm a very ambitious, like hardworking person. So I had that. So I was like, maybe this is where I'm at, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's where I'm going to be in a year. But I'm also like really loyal. And I was like, I like her kid. I like her. I think she's awesome. I support her. Maybe we can base something off of that.
Yeah.
And then the first step was just like, I kind of blew it.
I saw him again. It was probably 8 months later. I saw him at the gym, right? So I go to Excel. We're all at Excel. I see this guy like doing some kind of weird sprinting down the turf.
Did he look Australian?
He did not know.
That's an inside joke between me and Brandon.
He did it, but I was like, oh, that guy's hot. Like, who's that? And then I was like, oh, damn it, that's Brandon. But I went over to say hi, and he seemed genuinely happy to see me, and I seemed happy to see her. So we like connected every once in a while, right at the gym, just saying hi and stuff. He called me dork a lot and whatever. Yeah. Made it clear that like, we were just buddies and stuff. And I think the first time I started to feel like, oh my gosh, maybe like there's some feelings still there was at your house. We had gone to your house. We were playing games with your kids, remember?
Oh, yes.
It was a football game.
He was like merciless with your children. He was like, I will crush you, which I admired.
I still remember that.
But we were just sitting on the couch and he like leaned over and kind of squeezed my shoulder. And I was like, oh, like there was something visceral in me that like remembered how that made me feel. So we started hanging out and talking a little bit, but still not dating. And then came like the text message.
The text message. Wow.
Well, I don't know if you remember this as much as I do.
Well, you were gone. You were traveling. I mean, I remember it because you tell me so many times.
Yeah.
So now it's
I do because it's like a big deal.
Yeah. She was headed to...
I was going to the GoPro Mountain Games in Vail. It was June.
And I don't remember exactly what, other than pretty much the premise was like, I blew it.
Yeah.
That was it.
That was not it. I mean, I'm driving and like trying to like look through, do these like voice dictated texts. But basically he showed up in a way that nobody has ever showed up for me before. He's like, hey, out of the blue, he was like, hey, this is what happened last time. I was really insecure and I was really worried that like you were better than me in these areas. But like I've done some of my own work and I realized that like these are the things that I bring to the table. And these are the ways that like I can be really good for you. And I may never be as financially successful as you are, but like I don't think we need that to make it work. It was it was like the Ryan Gosling, like in the rain, the moment that every woman is like, oh my gosh, he showed up like this. It was huge.
Wow.
And so I was in Vail for the next like 4 or 5 days for these mountain games. But I was like, I would really love to come back and like make it work. Like he showed up and I showed up and like that was it. We were.
That's awesome. It's really cool because I'm still trying to figure out how you got to that place of all of a sudden having that courage. Because I think a lot of people, and I struggle with this too, self-worth of like the self-sabotage and like, no, it's not going to work out. And you convince yourself of that story and then you don't even try.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get to that point of being courageous at that point? Like, look, here's what I have to offer. I'm going to show up this way for you. Like, how did you make that leap in your head?
It's funny. I actually saw this quote the other day and I think it perfectly describes me. And it was something like, courage is knowing like the thing you're about to do is hard and doing it anyway, but so is stupidity.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I think part of it is that I have a pretty low aversion to risk. Mm-hmm. And I saw her as being like, hey, you're not going to come across this again. Mm-hmm. Like, take a shot.
Yeah.
She says no, but you'll feel like a total jackass if you don't say like the things you've been trying to say for the last 9 months, but you haven't had like the guts to.
So you still were thinking it.
But like I said, there was a lot of regret.
If I had an opportunity to talk to her.
Well, you go through like maybe like a quick relationship and you just kind of move on and there's like nothing there. You don't see it there. And this one was just like constantly kicking me like,
Wow.
Oh man, I shouldn't have done that. But she was really cool.
Yeah.
She was pretty advanced. So yeah.
And then you guys lived happily ever after, and now you're married.
We dove in pretty quick. We really did. We were kind of like, all right, if we're going to make this work, like we put a whole lot of our like shit on the table, and probably not even 2 months into it, started talking about whether or not like he would want a kid of his own.
Yeah.
Like really, if we're going to make this work, we need to talk about all of the hard things that we need to talk about, and spent probably a couple weeks like, do we want another kid? Like I already have one. He's 6 at this point. Like, do we want one of our own? Do we not? Are you going to be regretful if you don't have one? Like we got into some really hard conversations really early.
Yeah.
But I think that was just indicative of the fact that like we were both really serious about the relationship at this point. Yeah.
Making this work and moving forward and progressing forward, even though I'm sure there was hard times. I'm sure there were still like things where like, okay, we're going to have to work through this. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
We don't argue a lot. We don't fight a lot.
No, but we've had a couple.
Yeah. There were times where we didn't talk for a long time, you know, even while we were dating.
Yeah.
I had to go back to therapy so he could move in with us.
Yeah, I think you talked about that on social media recently.
I just did. I went back to therapy in the middle of last year because we were both at the point where we were like, I might not be able to handle someone else moving in with me. I was like so in my own space, and I'd been on my own for such a long time, and having someone else's energy, I didn't know how to manage it. And so I was like, I really want this to happen. Or I think I was like, I mostly want this to happen, but I'm going to use therapy to make sure if I do or not. Cause like that's a conversation that we really need to have. I think jokingly once I was like, what if we got married but like lived apart? And he was like, that would not work for me. And I was like, damn it. But like, I went back to therapy and spent 3 or 4 months in therapy every single week, like working through my stuff to figure out whether I wanted it. And if so, how I could make it work.
Yeah. How long were you divorced? Or how long you been divorced?
So we got divorced at the end of 2015.
Yeah.
So it's been almost 6 years.
Okay. Yeah. So do you feel like you built up this identity of being this single woman that lives by herself, and then to have someone else come in and move, that kind of rocks your identity a little bit, right?
That was a piece of it. He struggled for so long to get me to let him help with anything.
Oh yeah.
Because I was like, I literally don't need your help. I've been doing it by myself for the last like 5 years. I don't need anyone's help with anything. And he would be like, but I could make it so much easier. And it would give me bonding time with your kid and like let me take some things off of your plate. And that was definitely a long battle. And I think it was just, I had grown, I had filled my space. My clothes were everywhere. My stuff was everywhere. I had grown to fill my space, and I was like wondering energetically and physically, like how to make space for this new person. So it was a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And obviously you were able to get to a place where you were able to be at peace somewhat with that. Like therapy helped you through that. And then was it as when you did move in? Because I think this is the thing, and the reason I ask this is because I think, you know, there's a quote that says we suffer 1,000 times more in our head than we do in reality, right?
Yes.
So like him moving in, was it not?
It was a non-event. By the time it happened, it was like, oh, okay, he's here now, finally.
Yeah.
You know, we had tried these periods of like move in before where it was like, oh, why don't you just bring all your stuff and you stay here for a week and you like don't go home at all. And at the end of the week, I would just be low key such a jerk, like get out and leave me in my space for 3 or 4 days. By the time I got to therapy and we had worked all the way through like all my energy leakages and how this relates to like my relationship with my dad and how it relates to, you know, other like trauma in my life and all of that stuff, I was like, oh, all right, I get it. Right. And so it was really important that he and I talk through a lot of what I was going through in therapy. So he understood when I got like that it wasn't about him and he didn't do anything wrong. And he's really good about cueing into like, I'm going to go for a drive for a couple hours. Like, 'cause I can sense that you need some space. But honestly, it's been really easy, I would say, living together. Hasn't it been?
Yeah, for the most part. I guess, I mean, you covered it kind of earlier. Big chunk of my insecurity was like, okay, how do I provide in a relationship where this person literally needs nothing from me?
Yeah.
And so when I would be like, hey, can I help? And there was nothing for me to help on, I was like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
That was really hard.
Yeah.
So having her like be more open to me helping, and then me also just taking initiative and helping without being asked to help or getting instructions to help. I mean, we both have our own like systems of doing that, but that's kind of where I think things got a whole lot easier.
Yeah. You know, I wouldn't ask him for help. And so his insecurities would be like, oh, do you think I can't do it well? Are you not asking me for help with the kid because you think I won't take as good care of him as you would? And that's not it at all, right? It's just that I'm used to doing it by myself. I can't remember when it was, but at one point we were like, okay, why don't you take him to school every Tuesday and Thursday? Best thing we ever could have done. They get bonding time. I get 2 mornings a week where I get to go to the gym and like have a more relaxed morning.
Yeah.
Literally everyone wins.
Yeah.
I'm like, why aren't we doing this sooner? So I think we've figured out systems that allow us to share responsibilities more often. And we've just had to like talk it through where, we figured out he needs lists and like I do not. So if I put it on the list, it gets done. And like, oh wow, that's so easy. Great.
Yeah, it's so important to have that clear communication, because you just painted a perfect picture of like what so many relationships, the things that happen where one person makes up a story of like, oh, you don't want me to do this? Oh, it's because you think this about me, right?
Yeah.
And they create that story and that becomes their truth. And the other person's like, no, I wasn't thinking that at all. It's because of this. And then if you communicate through it, then you can come up with systems like, okay, maybe this will work for you. And then that's perfect.
Yes.
That's so beautiful.
But my therapist was the one that was like, I'm like, oh, he's always asking about taking my kid to school. And my therapist was like, just put it on a freaking schedule.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a good idea, right? So this is where like therapy comes in, where she's just like, what, have you thought about doing it this way? And I'm like, I didn't, but that's a really good idea. So
it helps you, think outside the box a little bit, and someone else's creative ideas like, oh yeah, maybe I should do that.
And then I'm not asking for help, and he's not asking me to give him things. It's just like, this is your job, Tuesday and Thursday, cool.
Okay. Yeah, I want to transition a little bit. I want to bring in Whole30 at some point, and I think this is really interesting or funny to bring up, because Brandon, when you guys started dating, was there pressure to be like, oh, she's this Whole30 person? Do I have to like eat a certain way to be a part? Okay, which I love. Talk about that. No. Like,
I don't care.
You don't care.
He cares like not at all.
Yeah.
He cares.
Yeah.
I care in the sense that, one, I'm super proud of her. 2, I know it works. Mm-hmm. I've done it a couple times because I wanted to do it. And I wanted to feel a little bit better.
Oh yeah, I would never.
But there's one, she's never pressured me into living a certain way. Yeah. And as great as her followers are, I don't care if they think I'm where I'm getting. I just don't care. Like there's no, I don't care about social pressure to eat a certain way. It's like, if I want an entire pint of Ben & Jerry's, I'm going to eat it.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's good for people to see that. What you said, something about her followers, was there like people saying something or like
when there's always oh
yeah, I know.
Sometimes I think people, especially if they're new, are surprised that I don't eat Whole30 all the time, and so they're very surprised when he's like drinking a rock star or something like that. I'm like, well, A, he's his own person, and B, like we don't have the same food freedom, or it's totally different. Like we have a ton of overlap in what we eat, and most of what we eat if I'm cooking is Whole30 because that's just how I cook, and most of what he cooks himself is like that. But our like fun foods are different.
I love that. No, and I get the same thing with keto. People are like, oh, I thought you were keto all the time. I'm like, no, I love dessert or fruit or whatever it is.
Yeah, but he was a big inspiration for why I stopped drinking.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's right, because you're not a drinker. Or you never drink.
No.
I've been duped into drinking one time.
By who? Not by me, right?
Joe Hillman. Okay. Joe, if you're listening.
What a jerk.
I almost strangled
That's
Joe.
That's messed up. How was this recently, like as an adult?
Yeah, it was, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago. We were playing in a big beach volleyball tournament in Manhattan called the Manhattan Beach 6-Man. We had just won, and Joe tricked me into drinking like a hard lemonade. And I was like, man, this tastes weird. And he just started giggling like you are now.
Dude,
We got doped,
I was like,
right?
Joe, I'm going to take you up back and strength.
I know. That's not
so
cool.
He felt really bad after that. He was like, oh my gosh.
Good.
Because other than that,
But no, he's never drank. And so I drank less and less the more time we spent together. And then eventually I was like, I'm just not going to drink anymore. Yeah. For the most part.
Yeah. Anything on the flip side of that, though, that has gotten you to eat that you normally wouldn't eat, that you're like, okay, I'm eating this because Brandon.
He gives me the first sip of every single one of his super shitty energy drinks.
Really?
And I love that sip so much. It is like a flavor you cannot find in nature. It is the least food-like thing I ever put in my body.
Yeah.
But that, like, what's the gummy one that I like? The white gummy?
White gummy bear from
Rain.
Yeah. I can only take the tiniest sip because it's caffeine and I don't do caffeine, but boy, do I love them.
That first sip.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. It's very romantic.
Yeah.
I just pop it and I just hand it to her.
She just gets that first sip. The first sip's the best too. So it's like
I know he's
that's
very
true
sweet.
Love right there.
Yeah.
I want to transition a little bit, talk about boundaries, Melissa. You I follow you on social media for years now, and one of the things I've learned from you, actually, honestly, is boundaries are so important. Not just I mean, obviously, you have a health and wellness brand, and we talk about, nutrition and stuff like that. But boundaries are something that's so important. I've struggled with boundaries my whole life. And you are like, when I'm like, okay, what would Melissa do in this situation? Like, you are my inspiration. How did you get to this point of like realizing boundaries are so important, and how has that thinking evolved over the years?
Yeah. I mean, boundaries really, I first started establishing boundaries in my recovery. It was after I got out of rehab the first time and was in recovery for a year and relapsed that I realized that I had to create some fences around my recovery, or I was never going to make it.
You just kept saying yes to people and you couldn't say no.
I
Is
didn't,
that what it was,
people would be around me smoking pot and they'd be like, is this okay? And I'd be like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just pretend everything was fine, or I was fine, or, do you want to come with us to this like sketchy thing? We don't really know what's going on. And instead of saying, no, I don't want to be in that environment, I would go and just cross my fingers that no one offered me anything. I had friends that still, used around me, or would bring like drugs into my home. Like just, I wasn't creating any safe space for my recovery to flourish. And I hadn't set any boundaries with myself around, things that I would or wouldn't do in my recovery. So the second time around was when I really started like flexing those muscles and saying like, don't ever offer me drugs again, because if you do, we can't be friends. And I don't want you to do that in my house, and you can't bring them in. I don't care what you do on your own time, but please don't like bring them into our friendship. And if we're going to hang out, we need to do something outside of drinking or drugs. And that was really when I first started to learn to set boundaries. But then when I co-founded Whole30 in 2009, I quickly realized I had to learn to say no to food and drink and the social pressures that came along with that, and really started helping people doing the Whole30 figure out how to say no in that context. Yeah. So boundaries have kind of always been like a part of my life, and helping people set boundaries has always been, and started with food and drink with Whole30, but quickly morphed to like, oh, you helped me say no to my mom's birthday cake. Now can you help me say no to the fact that every time she comes over, she brings a present that I don't want, or comes over without calling, or like, it's just a natural extrapolation into other areas.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm not smiling at he's licking my toes. And
so you're
trying not to like, it's like totally tickling me.
You said the second base with our dog. Yeah.
It's all good. That's what I was going to ask is like, at what point, obviously boundaries have been really important for you in your personal life. At what point when you started sharing that, did people kind of demand more of like, how did you, like, this really works? And did people ask you to keep educating them on it? Yeah. Okay.
It started a lot. Of course, it started with Whole30, and I have offered a number of times over the last 11 years a variety of resources to help people say no in their food freedom and say no on the Whole30. But it really escalated at the very beginning of COVID.
Okay.
When everybody's work and life and school and kids' boundaries came crumbling to the ground, and people couldn't figure out how to create the fences they needed to like keep themselves safe and healthy. Yeah. So I started talking about boundaries around COVID, around like, no, I'm not going to come to your party because I'm kind of like, staying socially distant, or no, we're not having Thanksgiving this year because we feel like it's just not a responsible thing. And the more I talked about that, the more people were like, help me with work, help me with relationships, help me with friends and family. So I've been talking about them nonstop for, really the last 11 years with Whole30, but they've really ramped up in the last few.
Yeah. And this is why like I'm such a huge proponent of letting people know, or educating them on how much of transformation is not just physical, right? Yeah. Like, okay, if I just eat this food and don't eat anything else, and then they don't factor in these other mental and emotional pieces that are really, really hard for people, right? Like, for example, for you, why do you think people struggle with boundaries? Is it because they're people pleasers, or what?
So many reasons. I think women struggle the hardest because we have been socially conditioned to stay small, to make ourselves like at the pleasure of others, to not make waves. To put our own needs kind of behind everybody else's, especially as a mom. So I think we struggle a lot. I think society, especially kind of the patriarchy and maybe some misogyny, teaches us that when we create these boundaries for ourselves, we are aggressive or bitchy and not labeled in the same way that a man would, where they just set their own boundaries. And I think we've just been like, as people pleasers and obligers, which is sort of the biggest population group, I think it's just really hard for us to stick up for ourselves. We've been spending the last 20 years trying to make ourselves small and put everyone else first. So now to even think about our own needs just somehow feels selfish and guilt-inducing before we even get the words out.
Yeah. And there's a whole nother world out there now that exists with social media and setting boundaries. Like setting boundaries in real life is hard enough. And then on social media, it's a whole different ballgame, right?
Yes.
How have you managed setting boundaries on social media versus like in-person boundaries? Is it different? Does it look different, or is it about the same?
It does look different because I have I have a big audience like you do, and your audience would want to hear as much from you as possible, and you have to decide how much you're willing to share. So I've always used Brene Brown's line of I share things that are personal but not intimate.
Okay.
So I share what I had for lunch, or I'll share my, a story about my child, but like we don't share his name. His face is never on social. We got married and didn't tell anyone for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks.
I know. Those pictures were amazing.
That was like, that was really important to me though. Is
Yeah.
that it was like, this is just for us and I don't want to have to share this with anyone. So I think I have really solid boundaries around social media. And sometimes there are times where we'll go out and he'll be like, oh, can I film this? And I'm like, oh, can you just not film this like one part? Just, if I don't feel like it. And we have good conversations around it.
Yeah. And so I'm going to ask a hard question. What do you guys do when you disagree on boundaries? And how does that, or do you guys always agree on boundaries?
I don't know. I mean, I think when it comes to things like putting things on social media, if one of us says no, that's just it. It's done, right? There's no arguing. That's sort of the baseline. But otherwise, I think we're pretty much on the same page with it.
Yeah. We haven't had too many issues. I think we've only had like the one issue of me vlogging, and it was like, can you not put that up? And I didn't really understand why. And then we had a discussion about it. And I was like, okay, I get it. And then but I've also said like, it was quite a ways after that when I started doing that more seriously. It was like, hey, like at some point, this is like, I'm going to have to do this more.
Yeah.
And so like, I need you to be on board with some things and just trust me that I'm not going to share, things that you would consider intimate.
Yeah. Because you're probably learning, okay, this is intimate, this is personal. And then you kind of.
So it was like, I know you want me to be present, and I will be. You just got to trust that I'm not going to like overshare. Yeah. And so it's like,
we just had a conversation about it, and that was pretty easy.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let's talk about presence. And this is really hard being on social media, right? Like your brand's on social media, you got your YouTube channel, and like what are some best practices that you guys have learned over the years of how do we stay present while also like taking pictures of our food and like filming this for social media? Like, is there like a certain limit you put on that per day, or how do you find that balance of like us being present but also performing for social media, right? Does that make sense?
It does. I have a rule that I think you pretty much adopt as well, that I never post real time. I just don't post real time. I don't want to take myself out of the moment to like stop and caption and stuff. So if I'm on a hike, I'll record. That takes like
twice as long.
I'll record pictures and stuff, and then I'll go back later when I'm home and relaxing and we have downtime, and we'll go through the photos and mark favorites and stuff. But like, that's one thing that I do. There are occasions where we'll be doing something and I'll be like, oh, can you please just put your phone away for like 2 minutes? And it's like, oh yeah, for sure. But I rarely have to do that. I feel like you have a really good sense of like, you know.
Yeah, I know I'm on a camera a lot, because that's part of what I do. But a lot of the stuff we do, I just don't remember. And so for me, it's kind of like my way to like, I just like after so many concussions, I feel like I don't remember so much anymore. But that's just my way of like experiencing it. And like photography definitely makes me see things a little bit differently. I appreciate things a little bit differently. But like she said, I really try to not dive into any sort of like post-production in the moment.
Yeah.
Like I keep it like post. If I'll go home.
Yeah.
I enjoy editing, and then, I'll
smart.
post later, but I'm not.
And there are sometimes when we're with the kid too, where I'm kind of like, hey, can we not make this like a super heavy photo day? Because he doesn't have the patience that I do, where like he'll stick around the same spot for 10 minutes getting a shot, and I'm super happy. I'll just wander around and take my own pictures or sit and meditate or whatever. And like my kid doesn't quite have that same patience. So, but I think we handle it. Like I think for two people who are on social media a ton for their jobs, I think we do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And you guys also love to hike. Right? And you guys just recently went to Yosemite. Yeah. How was that?
Oh, that was an awesome trip.
It was cool because
you went twice and Brandon went twice.
Yeah. So I went in February for my first time.
Okay.
We went for Firefall. And so like seeing how
What's
big.
Firefall? Sorry.
Firefall is this event that Yosemite gets for about 2 weeks out of the year where the snow melts and the sun just happens to be in the right position that the sunlight hits the runoff and it makes it look like lava.
Whoa, it's really cool.
So it's called the Firefall. And It is a huge event for tourists. That's the only part that sucks. It's really cool.
Oh, yeah.
So we did that in February, and she had never been. I was like, man, she's got to go. So she had a few days off, and we were like, Yosemite. Yeah. So for me, it was really cool to just watch her sit in this little valley and look at El Cap and just be like, oh my gosh, it's so big.
Yeah. Is that your guys' favorite place you've been? Oh, you guys have been to a lot of amazing places.
It's not my favorite. If you guys had to
pick like top 1 or 2.
Redwoods for me.
Redwoods?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for trees. Those things are amazing.
I know. I hiked in Norway for a week by myself a couple years ago, and that was my hands down favorite. But I think Glacier National Park here is probably my favorite. But Yosemite is like, I want to go back there now for at least a week.
Yeah.
And just do some like long
I want to go now because I've never actually been. It's like pictures of your video. I was like, dude, if I was there, I was like, I need to go with Brandon so he can capture like all the amazing footage. Isn't that nice to have someone like a professional photographer?
Yeah, it is. Actually, it really is nice. I get some great pictures of me for sure. I never mind. He's like testing out, I want to test out this lens or I want to test out this filter. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So we did Yosemite for like 4 days.
Yeah.
We came home. I was home for like 12 hours. And then me and my buddies drove right back and spent another like 3 days there.
That is so cool. We're coming up on time here, so I want to ask a couple questions as we close. And this is for both of you. You guys can take turns answering. What is maybe 2 or 3 books that you've read recently, or podcasts, or therapy, or something that has really inspired you or changed your mind, or something that's on the top of your mind like recently that is really like, wow, this book was awesome, or like this podcast where I had this therapy session.
That's going to be tough.
Okay, I have mine.
I have mine. She reads a book at night, so
Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. Okay. I have not stopped talking about this book since I got an advanced copy. It came out, The Comfort Crisis.
Okay.
So he talks a lot about how our inability to be comfortable, being uncomfortable, is like leading to like a whole bunch of not awesome results like chronic disease and just lack of vitality and stress resilience. And so he talks about kind of simple experiments that you can sort of do and ways that you can practice being uncomfortable, whether it's related to hunger or temperature. And he kind of weaves all of his research through this incredible story of him hunting elk in Alaska. It's like a riveting story that reads like, it's like nonfiction that reads like fiction, but also the messaging is so good. And that's what got me into rocking.
What's his name again?
Michael Easter.
Was he on Joe Rogan recently?
Yes.
Talking about, I listened to this podcast about this book. Yeah. That's so crazy.
I recommend that book to just about everyone. Okay. It's just, you don't have to go on this like elk hunt to Alaska to get a little uncomfortable and realize that like you're a little stronger than you think you are. My cold showers have been like a great experiment with that. So
yeah, are you still doing those?
I haven't in a while.
I kind of go through cycles too.
Yeah, I do them in cycles. I did them for like a year straight, and I feel like my concussion symptoms have been like so good that I haven't needed them. But I should probably throw them in once in a while still. Yeah, they're good for you.
It's hard when it's like freezing cold here in Utah, and you're like,
I like it better when it's freezing cold.
Really?
Oh yeah, I hate in the summer. I feel like it doesn't get cold enough. Yeah. But anyway, did you come up with a book yet?
Yeah. Well, no, because I don't read.
Yeah.
You
I struggle with reading.
Even like
you listen to books. Yeah.
I do Audible. I struggle with reading. I think now because of the concussion, it's really hard on my eyes to like try to follow along. 2 things I would say my favorite book of all time and probably a huge influence in me just going for it was Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. I'll always recommend that book.
Yeah.
That book's amazing.
I just listened to him on Tim Ferriss.
Mr. Pressfield's
I got to read that book.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's good.
So that was really good. And then just lately, your buddy Andrew Huberman's.
Oh, yeah.
He talks in depth. He's a neuroscientist.
At Stanford,
Very smart dude. And he just listening to his stuff on dopamine detoxing, context switches.
Huberman Labs is the podcast.
That sounds awesome.
It's great.
So he's got some really insightful stuff. So for me personally, we talked about being present, and I feel like I'm just so connected. Trying to disconnect is hard. The Yosemite trip, even though I was on a camera, it wasn't the same because I didn't use my phone.
Yeah, there's no
Yosemite was nice
service.
because you don't really get service in there.
It was so nice.
So I didn't have to check things, maybe like once a day at the very end of the day. I'd post something and just like whatever. So trying to do more dopamine detox, stay present, just try to rebuild. Somebody's going to chime in like, well, get rid of the caffeine. Just shut it.
No, I was going to say that because I'm the same way. I'm like, I like my addiction to caffeine. I know I'm addicted to it, but like, Yeah, but yeah, I have a limit. I can't do like 3 rock stars or anything like that. Like that's crazy.
I don't do
I'm more of a
that.
coffee guy anyways now.
Yeah.
As of recent. So
So gross.
yeah. Well, I know that you have some things coming up that we can't talk about, Melissa. But yeah.
Way to do
Yeah,
that.
exactly. We just gotta tease people. What trips you guys have coming up? Between you guys have any trips coming up?
I don't think we have anything. And no trips right now.
Besides Hawaii, coming to visit me, obviously.
Of
we know about
course,
that,
we're going to come
but-
visit you. Yeah.
Once things calm down.
We're just gearing up for the January Whole 30, which is
Yeah.
like our Super Bowl plus Oscars, all at once. So we're gearing up for some really great, couple cool launches and just helping the community through the
Yeah.
January Whole 30. So
Yeah. Well, I freaking love you guys. You guys are both awesome. And I'm so appreciative you guys came on the podcast again.
Thanks.
Any last words of wisdom you want to leave with the followers? Yeah.
I'm going to be doing a review of Henry.
Yeah.
You want to watch? Yeah.
We've had our
down.
dog
You
for a
might get a
year, so
review.
we're going to do his annual
It's a
review.
long-term review.
That is funny.
Henry.
Yeah.
Oh,
See how he stacks up.
that sounds like a great idea.
So if you want to
I'm
watch
interested. I'm interested in that.
Maybe for any
just-
any people out there listening who are like, man, that was the one that got away. You could just say like, shoot your shot,
Ooh, I like that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you haven't gone to therapy yet, maybe you could try that too.
Yeah, therapy has been a game changer for me.
Yeah.
He's good.
So, all right, well, let's go grab dinner. I
Sounds
appreciate
good.
you guys. You guys
Thank
are awesome.
you.
And we'll put all the links to the show notes. We'll put links to Whole30 and you guys' Instagram. Say your Instagram handle.
At Superhuman Performance.
Yes. And do you want to
Melissa, you.
Melissa, you?
Yep, that's my
Yes.
website
We'll
and
put that
Instagram. Yep.
in the show notes. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank
and we'll
you.
Talk to you guys
That's
again.
fun.
We'll definitely do this again.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course.
Of course.
Cool.